Hello, my friends. I'm so happy to have you here. I'm also so excited to introduce you to Alexis. Alexis is a former publicist, which I picked up on very early on in our conversation, and she's a mom of two from the Chicago area. She has been through so many medical curveballs, like true medical curveballs, with her daughter, Gabby, really since the beginning of Gabby's life. From a scary start in the NICU to relentless fevers, unanswered questions, a diagnosis that no one had ever heard of before, Alexis has learned how to advocate, how to speak up, and trusting her gut even when it made sense not to. Like a lot of other Child Life On Call episodes, sure, we talk about the downs, but the ups just seem to come. And so, talking about the glimmers that Alexis and Gabby share together, whether it was watching Grey's Anatomy on long infusion days, Gabby's still winning national figure skating titles. Yes, this family is that amazing. I love hearing the way that Alexis talks about Gabby because I can just feel the love between. And I think that's what makes these parent stories so incredibly special, is the love that bonds these two people together as they go through such difficult times.
Hey friends, welcome to Child Life On Call. My name is Katie Taylor. I am a mom and I'm a child life specialist. If you're listening to the podcast today for the first time, welcome, and we want you to know that the conversations we have here are designed for parents whose child has received a medical diagnosis. I know it may feel extremely terrifying and world-changing even, but you're here now, and you're about to hear from another parent who has had the same feelings that you do right now, and they're still standing. They had the courage to come here and share what it was like for them, to hopefully make it a little bit easier for you. I'm so grateful to each and every guest and each and every listener who shows up here, and it's my privilege to host this sacred space.
My name is Alexis, and I'm a mother of two, and I have a 17-year-old son, almost 17-year-old. I should not say that. I can't jump that gun yet because it's like in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And it's freaking me out that it's his last birthday before he becomes an adult, which is
Oh, no.
beyond. And I have a 14-year-old daughter. We're from the Chicagoland area. I actually married my kindergarten sweetheart,
No
but we
way.
did not date that whole time.
I would love to hear a little bit. You got married, you married Matt Kaplan, like you said you were going to in the fourth grade. You had a great career as a publicist, and then you became a parent. Talk to us kind of about what that part of your life was like.
Yeah. So that part of my life before I was a parent was very career driven. I had very clear goals as to what I wanted to achieve. I would say that I had a wonderfully successful career as a publicist and doing everything I ever wanted to do. I majored in one of those create your own majors. I always wanted to work in sports. I always wanted to work in something related to figure skating. As a former figure skater, it was my first love. And so I knew I needed to do something related to it. So at 25, I announced I'm moving to New York. And I actually was shocked that I was met with a lot of positive reactions, especially from my parents. And I just wanted to go do something for me and kind of be independent for the first time in my life. I picked up and moved on the 1st of January of the year I turned 25 and went off to New York and got a job in public relations. I was a PR girl in New York and I did all consumer work and I loved it. It was great. And my world and community was based around it. My cousin was living in New York City at the time. And so, we had each other and I always wanted to do something with skating. And
Yeah.
I got the opportunity to do that when I did a contractor job with one of the largest sports marketing and management groups in the world. And I got to work with old friends, I got to work with new people, and it was really for me like the pinnacle of my career. And then
Yeah.
I moved back home and my husband and I reconnected and I was still working in public relations in Chicago and, going about my career. And that's when my husband and I got married and I had my first son, Tyler. the love of my life, and
Mhm.
he was a healthy, happy baby. He was an emergency C-section, but that was pretty much it. Smooth
Yeah.
sailing all along. And 26 months later, my beautiful baby girl was born. And I was working part time up until that point. And that kind of all had to go to the wayside pretty quick.
Yeah, when you wrote to me and I got a glimpse into what the beginning journey of your life with your daughter was like, it was kind of straight out the gate. Maybe
Oh, straight out
typical
the gate.
pregnancy, but like after that birth moment, everything started to change.
Everything changed. The doctor, my obstetrician said, "Oh my goodness, you are never going to sleep at night because this kid's lungs." And about 30 seconds later, NICU swooped in and took my daughter away. And those are the lungs that then collapsed. And she was diagnosed immediately with spontaneous pneumothorax. I had no idea what that was. I was on the table getting a C section. You know, you're strapped down, you're a little bit delirious. There's a lot of anesthesia stuff going on. I wasn't really present at that moment. I don't even remember thinking about why am I not holding my baby? Like my baby was just born and I'm not holding her. I literally had very little consciousness of the magnitude of what was going on. And I think my husband as well. We were in the
Yeah.
moment. And I remember afterwards my husband saying to me, "Well, the nurses said, is it okay? We're going to have to take her to NICU." And my husband saying, "Yeah, sure." And I heard it, the voices, but like it was not resonating with me at that moment. And by the time I got into the recovery after the C section, the phone rang in the room and the nurse said, "Mrs. Kaplan, they want to talk to you." And I picked up the phone. And again, I'm still loopy from all of the anesthesia.
Yeah.
And they said, "Your daughter just had a spontaneous pneumothorax." And what that means is there was air between her lung and it wasn't able to expand. And we had to do a procedure immediately to remove the air, but we're going to have to keep her in the NICU for observation. It just didn't even register with me at that moment, the magnitude of what just happened. I didn't even, it just was nothing. It was like, well, I've already had a baby and it was normal. And I'm going to go back to my room and she's going to be there. And I don't know.
Yeah.
So after the recovery, after getting out of the recovery room and before getting brought to my room, they wheeled me up to NICU. And I'd never seen a NICU before.
Mm.
It's something most parents never want to have to see. And we rolled in, and, there's all the bays,
Yeah.
and there's children there that are 1 pound, 2 pounds. They're on machines. And then there's my robust baby who was 7 pounds, 11 ounces. And she's hooked up to cords all over her body. And I could see from my husband, he was very nervous. It was a very startling thing to see on your new child. And I don't know, my mom instincts kicked in. And I said, "Can I hold her?" And I was able to hold her. And they
Right.
tried to explain some of it to me,
Yeah.
but I also was still loopy and exhausted. And
Trying to
um,
process what you'd
I
just been
couldn't
through
even process
surgery.
it. You can't process it. Like, you just can't in that moment. And it wasn't until I went back to my room and there was no crying in my room. Like, you'd hear the other
Mm.
babies crying in their parents, in their mom's rooms. And, one of the things someone told me years ago, long before I had kids, is always utilize the nurses
Mm.
and the nursery when you have a baby so that you can sleep. Because if
Yeah.
you get your sleep at the hospital, you're not going to get the sleep when you get home. Well, it was just so bizarre because I'm in my room and I'm laying there and there's no baby, and
Yeah.
there's no baby crying, and there's no baby to feed. And it was just a bizarre feeling. And it was my sister in law who came in to visit, and she wheeled me down to the NICU. And she was really the only one besides me who would touch her and give her that feeling, I thought, at that moment of this is normal. It felt more normal with her for some reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, we had to wash our hands like 5 times and use the special soap, and it was
It's such a process. I worked with a nurse navigator in a NICU before, and she had such a good way to put it. She said that every time someone enters the NICU for the first time, it's like entering into a war zone. That's
oh,
how jarring to your system it is. And when your baby is
it's
there, it's the same response and it makes complete sense.
it's so bizarre. And I remember my sister-in-law, she has a social work background, and she was just curious. She had never been in one either. We have kids all 1 year stacked apart. And so she had never been in a NICU. We walked in, and she kind of was like gazing over just out of curiosity, the other children that were in there, and not realizing, you shouldn't really do that. I mean, you don't know the etiquette. You don't
You
know.
don't. Mm-mm.
You just
Yeah.
don't know. So
Yep.
we couldn't feed Gabby for the first 2 days. So
Yeah.
I was pumping and trying to feed her with a syringe after that, but she could not suck on anything because there was the fear of the air coming back into her lung. There was a little air that came back in, but it was able to release itself. So that was good. And that was a really good sign.
Yeah.
So my son came to visit, and he was so cute. And, we had prepared with the t-shirt, the best big brother, and all
Yeah.
this stuff. He was so excited, and we were able to bring him into the NICU to see her, thank goodness. And but I don't think he was able to process that. He wasn't able to process the difficulty of what he was seeing.
Yeah.
That was just his new baby sister.
Yeah. And I think that's okay. What it does for the family unit to be all together in one room is pretty powerful. And if
Mhm.
we can mitigate stressors for a young child to come visit, and even if they won't remember, but they won't be traumatized by the event, you can make it very special, very short. It doesn't have to be an hour long. It becomes a moment for the family unit to be connected. And I think that's really powerful.
I agree. And he was there more because he wanted to see me. And that was the longest he had ever gone without seeing me. So we kind of made it more about that and more about you're a big brother. This is
Mm,
exciting. And we had told him that we had planned a big brother party the day we were coming home from the hospital, and that we couldn't wait to celebrate that he was the big brother now,
yeah.
and made it special for him instead of having all the attention be this other human that was coming into his life.
Well,
So we got to go home
yeah.
after 5 days, and
Right.
that was the
Right.
beginning of our journey.
Take us through what some of the other things that were happening with her after that. And I know you guys had a series of challenges. Almost seemed like almost at every milestone.
I call them the curveballs, and they just kept throwing those curveballs. So we came home, and she didn't want to eat. She didn't want to eat anything I was giving her as far as breast milk. She did not want to eat formula. She sort of sealed her mouth shut immediately. It was very interesting. I find it amazing that a child, even at that age, knows when something is hurting and is able to react in a way like that. So, my son had been allergic to dairy when he was born, and we had given him alternative formulas. And so I kind of knew about that stuff, and I sensed that was probably what was going on, but I didn't know for sure. She was covered in eczema, and she was not thriving. There was no growth happening. She was losing a lot of weight. We kept taking her into the pediatrician, and the doctor kept saying, you got to keep trying to feed her the 8 ounces. You got to keep going. And every time we would get anything in her, she would projectile vomit it across the room. And she'd turn the eczema would get worse.
Yeah.
So we wound up taking her to the emergency room one night when she was maybe home for a week. And we said, we don't know what to do. She's not eating. She's vomiting. There's something wrong. And of course, they always go to, is there acid? Let's
Yeah.
check her for all that. And nothing was helping. And it wasn't until maybe a couple weeks later, I finally said to the doctor, I think I should try like soy or something, give her some alternative. And we gave her an 8-ounce bottle of soy formula. And this child sucked it up like you've never seen. And it
Oh, I'm
didn't come
sure
back up.
your relief
Oh,
was like,
it
"Oh,
was like, thank you, God.
yeah.
And she slept that night for 14 hours.
Oh my gosh." Y'all are both so exhausted, I'm sure.
I actually was scared. I kept, that feeling when you have the new baby and they
Mhm.
sleep actually, and you keep,
Yeah.
are they like
Like, something's
breathing?
wrong. Yeah.
Yeah, something's wrong. So she slept for 14 hours and it was amazing. And so we started giving her the special formula, the soy formula, and everything seemed to be going okay until she started getting these raging fevers. And I had experienced fevers and stomach flu and all that stuff with my son. He was going to preschool by the time he was 2. So I got that stuff. But these were like out of control wildfires. I mean, she would just burn up and it would be like in an instant it would go from like 102 to 106 in
Wow.
in like a half an hour. And the first time it happened, of course, we went straight to the emergency room. And it always happens in the middle of the night. We all
Of
know that.
course.
It's
Mhm.
never at a convenient
Nope.
time. It's never at walk-in hours. It's always
Mm-mm.
in the middle of the night. So I run her to the emergency room and they wound up knowing us in the triage there, by the way. And raging fever. And from the beginning, she would not let us give her any Tylenol. She didn't ever want any medicine.
Yeah.
So, of course, then we have to do like the suppositories and the IVs because she wouldn't do that. And the fevers just would not break. And it would take hours and hours for them to even just start to go down a little.
Wow.
And then came all of the ear infections. And it was really interesting with her because she would get an ear infection. And I was used to my son who would get an ear infection and he'd cry and pull his ear or something like that or say it hurts. Obviously, she couldn't speak yet, but she would get an ear infection and just sleep. Or she'd rub her ear against the carpet if she was like doing tummy time or something like that. And it wasn't until one day she had a high fever. I was able to get right into the pediatrician's office. We're driving there and I look in my rearview mirror at her and I noticed her like twitching and almost like seizing. It was like almost that kind of thing that you were looking at. She was barely conscious. She hadn't eaten. And I ran her into the doctor's office and said something's wrong. And they took us right in and the doctor listened to her lung and immediately the hospital was across the street from our pediatricians and the doctor and I grabbed her and ran across the street to the ER.
Oh,
And what the doctor said to me, it's faster to do that than it would be to call an ambulance.
yeah.
So let's just run. We literally ran across the street around the corner and there we were. And that was the first of the really bad rounds of pneumonia, RSV, ear
Yeah.
infection, the whole shebang. And she was hospitalized that time. The second time she was admitted. And that time the fever wouldn't go away. Her pulse ox was just plummeting. She was on oxygen around the clock. She had breathing treatments around the clock. And they really couldn't figure out why this was fully happening.
Yeah.
And I wound up calling a meeting, maybe day 2, with all the doctors. It wasn't a pediatric hospital, but they had a pediatric unit.
Yeah.
And so I called a meeting and said, you guys, is it RSV? Is it pneumonia? What's going on? And that's when they did the blood test for RSV and the chest x ray for pneumonia. And I believe the chest x ray came back first. And they immediately found that she had double pneumonia behind her heart.
Mm.
And then came the RSV positive. So, it's a double edged sword. You're relieved that they have a diagnosis, but you're also scared. Why is this kid getting this constantly?
Right.
And so they were able to put her on steroids and antibiotics right away. We wound up being able to go home. Her fever broke and it was like done and good by the next morning. And we were able to go home
Great.
and continue to give her the medicine, but it didn't stop. And the next ear infection came when we went to the pediatrician's office. They said there's no infection. We wound up going to the ER that night with a high fever. They said her ear was so full of fluid that they couldn't even tell if there was an ear infection at that point.
Oh, wow.
And so they had to kind of vacuum it out, look in, and they said, and they looked at her chart. And I remember the resident saying to me, "You need to go see an ENT. They make like a Mickey Mouse and a Minnie Mouse, and they're making sounds, and the kid turns and is supposed to turn." At this point, the tears are flowing down my face. I knew in my heart of all hearts, this was not the way it was supposed to go.
Yeah.
So we go back into the doctor's office and talk to her. And she said, "Well, if it walks like a duck and it talks like a duck, it's probably a duck. Let's schedule the surgery."
Yeah.
And decided to do an adenoidectomy and the tubes and to do some special process. The anesthesia was terrifying to me for my child.
Of
Um,
course. It's like when the doctors say, this is routine for us, but not routine for you.
Absolutely. And I think that was the first time child life came into play for us.
Oh, wow.
And they appeared with, I think it was a Barbie doll, and her very first Barbie doll. And it later became that child life was related in her brain to being the toy store.
Love.
So it was so
We'll
sweet.
take that. We'll take that 10 out of 10
Right?
times. Yeah.
Right? And that's when I learned about child life. And I learned that every time we'd go to anything, we would call in advance and I'd say, "Okay, I'm bringing her in. Can you guys meet us in the waiting room?" And they do their thing. And they were great.
Love.
Whether it was an iPad, a beanie baby, a
Mhm.
Barbie doll, it was fabulous.
Right.
And to this day, we utilize it. And
Good.
so we got that procedure done. She started talking within a week,
Wow.
never stopped talking. So things got better, I would say, for a little bit. We were recommended to go to a pulmonologist. And this doctor was the most amazing ray of sunshine in my life at that moment. She was the first doctor that actually read every page of everything she had ever had done. And it was so amazing. And she said, "All right, we've got asthma, that's for sure. We treated that." She said, "But I'm going to send you to immunology and I'm going to make sure that they test everything. I just want to make sure everything's okay." And that was our first, like, ding, ding, maybe something's wrong with her immune system. She was starting to also have stomach problems by that point. And so we were recommended to also go see a rheumatologist. The rheumatologist, after 6 months of waiting to get in, clinically diagnosed her with periodic fever syndrome and specifically FMF, familial Mediterranean fever. I actually took her to my rheumatologist because I have psoriasis. And I thought, I'm just going to take her to mine. He's not board certified pediatrics, but he'll see her.
Yeah.
So he said, "You need to get a tonsillectomy. It's the number one treatment for both of those things, and it really does help the fevers." So we immediately went and scheduled a tonsillectomy, and still the symptoms persisted, and she stayed on the other medication for the periodic fever syndrome and the FMF. And it was, we called them feverless flares then.
Got it.
And we just didn't get what was going on. And so,
It's like you're having to play detective and you're
oh, I
even from the way you're speaking now, you're her historian. You know everything that she's been through and you're trying to connect the dots.
it's never ending,
Yeah.
never ending. And so we took her to a gastroenterologist, and then they scheduled an endoscopy. And they said there was a little inflammation, but it wasn't much. That was one of those times when you're sitting in the waiting room and the doctor comes out and says to you, "Mrs. Kaplan, can I see you in the conference room?" And
Mhm.
your heart sinks. You
Yeah.
don't know what they're going to present to you. It's really that moment of terror for a mother.
Right.
By this time, I got in there. I had learned to really numb out all of that fear and
Mm.
anything on my end that was emotional because I knew that I had to be strong.
Yeah.
And he showed me the pictures from the scope and he said, I've never seen this before. So they came back to us, and that's when they told us that she had medicine induced collagenous gastritis. I had never heard of collagenous gastritis. That was because at the time, there were maybe 400 people in the world documented as having this. But, we never stop fighting as parents.
Yeah.
And again, the curveballs come and they just keep coming because then your child is diagnosed with a chronic illness that nobody really knows anything about. I also had read about immunodeficiency, and a lot of the things were ringing bells to me. So while we were in the hospital and she was having the iron infusion, and then, they were planning to let us go home the next day, I said, would it be possible for you to do an immuno panel? Just while we're
Mhm.
here, can you run it? Like, you're taking so much blood, let's just do an immuno
Just
panel.
yeah, add
Panel.
it on.
So I knew in the back of my head we were going to go get a second opinion. We got the immuno panel. We were able to go home. And about a week later, we went to this different hospital and saw the chief of pediatric gastroenterology. And by that time, all the blood work was back, but I hadn't seen it. But she had been able to get it. And she walked in the room just like the pulmonologist had, but like now, like this is her file.
Right.
And this doctor had read every page.
Mm.
And she said, I can't do anything until you go to immunology. Are you
Wow.
aware that your daughter is immunodeficient? And I looked at her like she had 10 heads and said, what does this mean? And
Yeah.
she said, I don't think her body is producing any antibodies to fight any upper respiratory stuff. That needs to be fixed before I can come up with a plan for her stomach.
Right.
So, long story short, we went to immunology quick after. They were able to run all of the tests, and it took about a year of going
Wow.
to, we had to eliminate everything. It's all a process of elimination.
Sure.
So we eliminated every other possibility, and she was officially diagnosed with immunoglobulin deficiency and primary immunodeficiency, and it was her IgGs that were completely depleted. Now, mind you, we're like knee deep in COVID by this point, so she's not in school anyway. And that was when they were able to finally start giving her IgG therapy, which is a sub-Q IV that they get that she's able to do at home. Now, my child is a strong and stubborn little girl. The nurse comes to our house for the very first infusion, and she's, planning to show my daughter, like, and do it all for her. My daughter said, no, give me the needle. I'm putting it in.
I love
So,
it.
okay. And I'm looking at this nurse and I'm like, her life is out of control. She needs power.
Yeah.
And she inserts the needle the first time. She puts the Tegaderm over. She
Love
presses
this.
on. And our tradition has become that we watch Grey's Anatomy while we infuse once a week.
Yeah.
And that's that. And it's the two of us laying on the couch doing this together every single week. We did it 2 days ago, and I am yet to ever do it for her. I'm not allowed to
Wow.
touch a thing. She
Mhm.
fills her syringe. She does the whole shebang.
Wow.
We have a home nurse that comes. We have the favorites and the
Yeah.
ones who find the veins the quickest
Yeah.
and
Of
who use
course.
the
They go to the top of the
ultrasound,
list.
right? Right. And the buzzy bee and
Yeah.
all the things that you learn, the tips and tricks of the trade and the EMLA cream and how long to put it on before.
Alexis, I'm like so impressed by you. And there's this like, it's not really a phenomenon. It makes a lot of sense that like when you have a child who goes through all these medical issues, you end up sounding like you went to medical school and how
A
much you
hundred
know and how
percent.
much you understand. And I would love to ask you how Gabby's doing now. It sounds like you have your treatment plan in place. You have your weekly Grey's Anatomy meetings. She's able to skate. She's able to do what she loves. How are you feeling now that not that things are ever under control because I know there's a lot of curveballs that can come up, but what's your way of processing now?
My way of processing is just loving my baby. And when there is those painful moments
Yeah.
and thinking about how lucky I am that I have this beautiful light in my life and that we get that special time together. I watched her win a national title as a figure skater last year, and nobody there knew that any of this goes on.
That's
And
incredible.
she's able to do what she loves to do. Now, we were just thrown a new curveball a couple months
Yeah.
ago, and we're starting to
Mm.
figure out how to deal with it.
Yeah.
We're going to be seeing some new specialists to try and figure it out. We're really good at doing it together. It takes the term mother daughter team to a different level, but we're very close. We're very in sync. I can look at her, she can look at me. We know each other's emotions by looking.
What a
Um,
gift.
it's such a gift. I treasure everything I have with her, and I just want her to have the life to be as most fulfilling as possible. She's able to do something she loves,
Yeah.
and the team around her, both on the ice and medically, are very in tune with her.
Yeah. I see like the perseverance trait in both of you, because it's in her, she's uncomfortable, she's in pain, she's fighting different things every single day. And you didn't have it easy either. And
Right,
you
right.
figured out how to persevere. What's something that you've learned about yourself since becoming Gabby's mom that maybe you didn't know about before? You didn't know about yourself when you were a publicist or, um,
Oh, I didn't know I could be this strong when the IV blows and the vein is infiltrated and your kid is screaming. You learn what needs to get done in that moment and
yeah,
how to advocate, how to be assertive, and even unfortunately, times that you have to be aggressive
right.
to get what you need, and how to
Child.
comfort your child in these times of devastation. And I think of myself and how I would have reacted at that age.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you look at her and it's like, how are you this strong?
Right.
Like, how do you even get up in the morning and go to the rink?
Right.
And it's amazing. It's amazing. The one story I'll tell you is when we went to go get her first COVID shot, the very first time it came out. And we had to do it right away because of the immuno issues. And
Mhm.
she's standing in line at the children's hospital waiting to get it. And there's all these kids behind her and all these kids in front of her, and they're terrified. She's like, I'm going to give you a trick. And she has a trick. And she takes her cell phone, and whatever they're doing, if it's blood, if it's a shot, she holds her phone like this,
To
and she
cover it?
watches TikTok or Instagram reels, and she
Yeah.
just looks at it down, and she is able, it's her thing. And she's
I
telling all
love
these
that.
kids in line how to do that.
So
And I remind her
empowering.
of it.
Yes.
So
Oh my
empowering.
gosh.
Well, she empowers me, and
Right.
I think vice versa, and I think that's
Yeah.
how we get through it.
Yeah. You mentioned Facebook groups helped you get some really good information. What other resources do you recommend for families who are facing a similar diagnosis?
I think I think Google truly is a
Yeah.
fabulous place, and don't be afraid to be Dr. Mom sometimes.
Mm,
You need to be, especially when you get a child diagnosed with something very rare
right.
and that nobody knows. And Facebook has been just an amazing resource. I'm in like so many groups, and there's a collagenous gastritis group, and there's immunodeficiency groups, and we all just share our tips and tricks and what we
Yeah.
do. And when her sub Q IVs go bad, and we have to call a nurse in to come and oversee it just to make sure we're doing it right. Don't be afraid to speak up, and don't be afraid to ask questions to doctors. It's your baby,
Yeah.
and it affects your life too, so don't be afraid. And the other thing is we've also started therapy with a therapist that specifically specializes in children with chronic conditions,
Yeah.
and that's been just gold for us.
All using all of the resources that are available. Thank you for being so open and vulnerable about sharing like some of the details that it takes because it is kind of like when I'm seeing you, it's like this block and then this block, but they're all kind of building on each other and now they're starting to make sense. But you
They
don't know
are.
that when you're at the beginning, just trying to put all the pieces together.
100%. 100%. And thank you for having me. Thank you for recognizing what all of us as parents go through, whether our kid has a cold or
Yeah.
something like this, it doesn't matter.
Well, I'm of the belief that the key to pediatric care is supporting parents. And when parents feel supported, they have the bandwidth to do what's necessary for their child. And that's my
I
whole soapbox.
I agree, and I think that if your doctor is not supporting that, then it's not the right doctor.
Go find a new one. Hmm.
Yep.
Well, where can we watch our ice skating videos and where can we follow
Oh,
along with what's
so
going on? We would love to do that.
so her Instagram that she just updates all the time is GKAPS
Okay.
underscore skates, SKATES.
Love that.
And I have recently started a new Instagram page where I'm going to start doing some good blogging and talking about all of this stuff. And it is called keep underscore throwing underscore curveballs
That's perfect.
because the
I love
curveballs
it.
aren't over.
They're not stopping.
No, they are not, but we know how to deal with them.
You do. Well, thank you so much, Alexis. I've loved our
Thank
time.
you.
As a parent, you want to be there for your child, especially when it comes to their health. But healthcare can be overwhelming and confusing. The good news is child life specialists are experts who help families navigate these challenges. But often our support is only in hospitals. So imagine if you had access to these valuable tools and resources all the time. You would be able to understand medical procedures, explain them to your child, and help them feel less anxious, which also makes you probably feel less anxious. So, when your child visits the doctor, has surgery, or has a medical procedure, having the right information and support can make all the difference. You, the parent, can be prepared to answer their questions, calm their fears, and advocate for their needs. Child Life Specialist tools are ready to be in your hands right now through our app Support Spot. All you have to do is go to the iOS or Android store, type in Support Spot. We are giving all of our listeners on this podcast access to the app for just $19.99 for an entire year. You are going to have, I'm not kidding, 7 years worth of resources and support and information that we have been building at Child Life on Call at your fingertips. With these tools in your pocket, you can transform the way your family experiences medical care. Parents, you deserve to be informed and feel confident in your child's healthcare journey. And by having access to Support Spot, you can ensure that your child feels supported and understood no matter what medical challenges come your way. Head to the link in the show notes or go to your app store, type in Support Spot to download it today. For those of you who are joining us today, I am not a doctor, I'm not a therapist, I am a child life specialist. And the suggestions and tips and resources that I talk about with parents on this podcast may be great for you and they may not be right for you. So, the most important person you can talk to about getting support is your care team, your doctor who knows your story and your child's story. So, regardless of maybe what I mention or what other families mention here, we're not licensed therapists, we're not doctors. We're having a conversation about what the parenting journey has been like. So, please keep that in mind as you listen today.